A surprising retirement, a new role for one of the top players on defense, and some roster moves. All that today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Friday, August 2nd, 2024, and I'm your host, John B. from GanggreenNation.com. Thank you so much for making the show your first listener, first watch every day. Subscribe to the show for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you'll get new episodes as soon as they're posted. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out and helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs have wound down, the sports have stopped sportsing like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, we begin our show today with a retirement. Tarik Cohen has decided to end his attempted comeback to the NFL. He is retiring. You may remember a few months back, Cohen signed with the Jets. Now, when he entered the NFL as a fourth-round pick in 2017 with the Chicago Bears, Cohen's career got off to a great start. He actually made a Pro Bowl. He established himself as one of the top return men in the league. He, in his second season, really had a big year for the Chicago Bears, but things kind of fell off after that. He suffered some injuries, suffered a torn ACL that took him a couple of years to recover from. And then at the point he thought he was finally over the knee injury, he suffered an Achilles tendon tear. And we all know about that injury. We've heard quite a bit about that that injury when it comes to the New York Jets, the way it can affect somebody. So Cohen signed with the Jets in the offseason, hoping to ignite a comeback. I think that part of the calculus with the Jets is the new kickoff rules, which is an explanation that's used for the signings of lots of players. Jets wanted to see what he could do. It was always a long shot. This is a guy who hasn't even played in an NFL game since 2020, and it's been since 2018 since he was actually an impact player. Now, as I said at the time the Jets signed Cohen, you got to bring 90 guys to training camp. So you think about it, you bring 90 guys, only 53 can make your roster. So you're going to bring guys who don't really have much of a shot. Cohen, 4 years removed from playing in an NFL game and 6 years removed from really being an effective NFL player. He was always kind of a long shot, I think, to make the roster. But he's probably had a better shot. There was at least a better chance of him reclaiming his old form than like a lot of the guys the Jets bring in. So I thought it was perfectly worth kicking the tires. And the people around the team seem very surprised. A lot of the beat writers who are at camp every day are kind of shocked because they thought he was looking pretty good in the early stages of training camp. I mean, I think I even saw one or two suggested he stood a strong chance of making the Jets roster. I think that's taking things a little bit far. And I think that's reading, I always warn about reading too much into early training camp results because these practices don't really resemble game situations. And at the end of the day, they are simply a couple of practices. Typically two things that do not add to your explosiveness are age and injuries. Now, I understand that Cohen was trying to make the case, I'm fully recovered from my injuries, but the injuries he suffered back to back, they can have an impact, especially when a player relies on explosiveness. A quarterback like Aaron Rodgers suffering an Achilles tear, it will impact him. He's not going to be as mobile. But at the end of the day, while mobility was a part of Rodgers' game, the biggest part of Rodgers' game is deciphering what's at the line of scrimmage, adjusting the plays and throwing the ball accurately. It's going to hurt. He's not going to be as mobile this year. And while mobility was certainly a part of Rodgers' game, the biggest part of Rodgers' game is the stuff quarterback throwing the ball. Cohen's game was all about explosiveness. It was all about athleticism. At his best, he was a premier return man, and he was also a good weapon to have out of the backfield. He could make big plays out of the backfield. He could catch the ball. He could break big runs. To expect Cohen, 6 years removed from looking special, and again, all these injuries that had piled up, to expect him to regain something resembling that old form, it was a lot to ask. So I don't think it's the shock. It's a surprise because, 2 days ago he was mentioning how he felt fully recovered. So I guess from that standpoint, it's a surprise. It's good that he was, looking solid in the early stages of training camp, certainly. But I don't think it's like this is the bombshell that people are making it out to be. I think that Cohen always faced long odds to make the roster, and he faced even longer odds to be an effective player for the New York Jets. Again, nothing wrong with kicking the tires on a guy like this. You got to bring 90 to camp. So, there's certainly worse uses of a roster spot than trying to find somebody looking to reclaim his old form. And again, the new kickoff rules. I always I'm always a little skeptical of using the new kickoff rules because I feel like we explain every signing about the new kickoff rules. We sign some defensive player, well, it's because we're going to want a guy like this to cover kickoffs, or if it's an explosive guy in space, well, we want this guy to return the ball. But with Cohen, a guy who has a track record as a returner, and no matter how the new kickoff rules play out, and I think that it could go a lot of different directions. I think there will be more kickoffs returned this year because of these rules. The rules are incentivizing players running the ball back. It's not a bad idea to try and bring in a guy who has a great track record in this area. Now, fortunately for the Jets, they have some other options here. I would expect Malachi Corley is going to be in the mix. He's not a traditional explosive kickoff return guy, but a guy who's tough to bring down. And in a scenario where these new rules lead to more bodies being in a certain location, having a guy who runs like Corley could be a benefit. Xavier Gipson is the incumbent. He was kind of up and down last year, but who knows, maybe year two he gets a little bit better. The Jets have other options, and I think that it was always a lot to ask for Cohen to come back. And I see people again, the writers who were saying he stood a good shot at making the roster. We can't really say that right now because these practices are built to favor guys who are either on the offensive side of the ball or make plays with the ball in their hands. And I'll tell you, I've been to these training camp practices in the past, and you can't judge anything based on the return. The return drills are so lacking in depth. They just don't really show you anything. It's really guys just catching the ball and then kind of running through an obstacle course more than anything. It's not really an indication of return ability. If you're talking about how you decide a camp battle for a return spot, that can really only be done once the exhibition games begin. Because while a lot of the practices don't do a great job of simulating actual game scenarios, the kick returns, the punt returns, and the kick returns, they do zero to simulate game simulations. You can't really see whether a guy is going to be able to break a tackle because they don't really tackle it in these situations. And a lot of times these drills, when we're talking about the return guys, they're going at half speed. So anybody telling you like this Cohen was on track to making the roster, look, maybe he looked quick in the early stages relative to other guys, but you don't really know until the exhibition games start. And my hat's off to anybody who's gone through what Cohen went through, multiple serious injuries, and tries to give it a go to try and revitalize his career. Because there was, Cohen, nobody would have blamed Cohen if he just decided to pack it in before this. He decided to give it a try. He decided to try and revitalize his career. And, I'm not sure whether maybe it didn't work out, or maybe, he just didn't want to do it, or maybe he just felt his body couldn't hold up. And, it's unfortunate to see a player's career end, but, this was always a move you were hoping for the best. It was always a move where, maybe there was a path for him to find something again, but it was always really, really unlikely we were going to see the Tarik Cohen of 2018, 6 years later, and multiple serious injuries removed from that, because this was a player. And, when you talk about how guys are going to age, the thing I always look at is how much does this guy depend on athleticism? How much does he depend on speed? How much does he depend on, things that erode with time? There's certain guys like, Rodgers is a good example. Rodgers, I think physically will, not be what he was 10 years ago, but he's going to be as smart as ever. And smarts, you can win with smarts at the quarterback position. You have to, at a skill spot, especially at a return guy or running back, especially running back on the smaller side, you've got to win with athleticism. And that's all there is to it. That's why, it's one of the reasons running backs don't age well. You always hear about how rare it is to have like a running back in his late 20s or 30s. That's why, because at the running back position, smarts only get you so far. You got to be able to make a play. And it's just tough. It's tough. It's a tough spot to play. And unfortunately for Tarik Cohen, it seems like we're at the end of the line. Now, ahead here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we're going to talk about a guy who's not at the end of the line, a guy who's still in his 30s and still playing really high-level football, and his role is expanding this year. There's going to be more on CJ Mosley's plate, and we'll discuss that continuing here on this Friday edition of Locked On Jets. Our episode of Locked On Jets today is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. And eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at all the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. And a big shout out to you every day, as this is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. So CJ Mosley earlier this week was on Kay Adams' show, and the veteran linebacker was asked about, how things might be different this year and how much freedom he has. And Mosley responded that he has total freedom now, and he mentioned that he's now a Ray Lewis, Luke Kuechly style of linebacker. And, you certainly hope he plays at that level. Mosley's an excellent player. But I think the answer was that's actually a very illuminating answer. It's more illuminating than you typically get from one of these training camp interviews, because it suggests something actually is changing on the Jets defense. And if you want more information on this, Rivka Board at jetsxfactor.com wrote a great article on this. And my thoughts were exactly the same. Robert Saleh tends to not give, and this is based on interviews we've seen in the past with both players and coaches, he tends to not give his defensive players a ton of autonomy at the line of scrimmage to change what the call is. And there actually was a play 3 years ago, Saleh's first season. It was actually Saleh's first win as the Jets head coach against Tennessee. And on a key play, Mosley changed the play at the line of scrimmage because he didn't like what he saw. He thought Tennessee was in. He saw it based on his film study. He knew that the Titans were in a perfect play for the Jets defense. So Mosley changed the defensive call, and the Jets were able to get a key stop on that play. And after the game, Saleh kind of said, he doesn't really have that authority. Mosley wears what's known as the green dot. So if you're familiar with the way signals are relayed to quarterbacks in the NFL, you may know that quarterbacks in their helmet, there is actually like a radio system so that a coach or a player on the headset can tell the quarterback directly what the play is. On the defensive side of the ball, there's one player who has a green dot on his helmet. It's a green sticker with a circle. He wears that on his helmet to signify to the officials that he's the guy with the headset. There's one player on defense who has a headset, and that's essentially the defensive coaches on the headset call in the play to him. And I believe it's actually like a relic of Spygate if you go back when the Patriots were stealing the Jets signals, because for a while only the offense had a player with a radio system where the coaches could directly relay the play in. Then the Patriots stole the Jets signals in that game in 2007, so they changed it. It's now no more defensive signals that relay in plays. Just a coach on the headset can call it into one player, and Mosley's that guy. And I'm a big critic of the Jets coaching staff. I probably should not be as critical as I am with them on the defensive side of the ball. The offense, they deserve a lot of criticism. The defense, they've done a very good job the last few years. But this is a quibble I have with them. CJ Mosley is one of the smartest players at the linebacker position in the league. And I just don't know why it took until now. Now, Mosley mentioned, this is year 4 in the system. Now we know it. Now we really know it well. And there's probably something to that. There's probably something to the idea that, now we fully know the system. We fully know all the options at our disposal. Year 1, maybe we did not. That said, Mosley's a savvy of a player. And I mean, that's one of the reasons Mosley's so good. Talking about guys who age well, why is Mosley still playing effectively into his 30s? He's not super fast, not super athletic, but he's smart. He knows where to position himself. He knows where to line himself up pre-snap. He knows what angles to take to the ball. That's why Mosley's continued to be a very, very effective player into his 30s. And he also knows what he's doing, getting the team lined up. He's been around the NFL for a long time. This is year 11 for CJ Mosley. So he knows, his film study is top notch. And it's always impressive. These guys are so impressive in the NFL because the film study they do, they'll notice like some small thing about the formation, and that will tip them off to what the play is. Sometimes it's just like how a player aligns, whether his left foot or his right foot's forward. Maybe could just be like a wide receiver, like how he's aligned, something about his stance pre-snap. And that tells you everything you need to know about the entire play if you're a great student of film. It's so impressive the way these guys are. And Mosley is among the most impressive players when it comes to this area. So now Mosley has full authority to change things at the line of scrimmage. And I think that's a good thing because, sometimes you just get caught in the wrong play. And to me, it's the player, it's your top player's job to get you. If the coaching staff sends in the wrong defensive call, it's on the players to get you out of it. It's on the players to notice that. It's on the players to make a change. The phrase "coach on the field" is frequently overused, but I think in Mosley's case, it's accurate. And the thing that's going to be great about the Jets on offense this year with Rodgers at quarterback is that he's going to be able. He doesn't need to like audible to change the entire play. So a lot of quarterbacks, like this was the case with Zach Wilson. If he saw that if the Jets run a passing play, but the other team ran a light box, Wilson had the ability to change the entire play. He could check to a run, and that's helpful, and that's something you should do. Rodgers could just tweak something about a receiver's route. If a guy's supposed to run a vertical route, but the defender is giving him too much cushion, Rodgers may just change the receiver's route to like a slant or something like that, and use the corner's leverage against him. Maybe just tweak a receiver's route, not change the entire play. And Mosley's on that level on the defense. Well, I don't know if he may not be on the Rodgers level, but Mosley executes at a very high level on the defensive side of the ball. He may not need to change the entire play. There might just be like one small part of the play that he feels they should tweak, and he can do that. And this can have a big impact on a team. If I go back 15 years, there was a former Jets linebacker, Jonathan Vilma, who was traded to the Saints. And in the Super Bowl, the Saints were up against the Colts that year. And a lot of people will tell you Vilma was actually the MVP of that game. You didn't notice it, but Vilma was going, play for play with Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning was changing a play at the line of scrimmage. Vilma changed the play accordingly. It was kind of a chess match between the two of them pre-snap. And it was something you did not appreciate watching the game live. It only came out like after the game, the role Vilma played. So this stuff can make a big difference, especially when if the Jets have Super Bowl dreams this year, which means you're going to be playing against some of the great quarterbacks. If to get to the Super Bowl, you're going to have to beat some of the great quarterbacks in this league, and the great quarterbacks in this league are excellent at deciphering what the defense is doing pre-snap and changing it. And those quarterbacks get their team into the right play. Rodgers does this all the time, so you want to have the ability to counter that. A guy like Mosley potentially gives the Jets the ability to counter that when you're up against Josh Allen or Joe Burrow or Mahomes. Those guys are going to be able to see what the Jets are doing at the line of scrimmage and adjust their play accordingly. So Mosley then will be able to look at the adjustment the offense made and make his own adjustments on defense. It's the type of thing that we won't notice live. It's the type of thing that will fly under the radar quite a bit, but it's the type of thing that can make a big difference. And there might be a big play or two where you see Mosley make a signal and it'll get the Jets out of the wrong defense and into the right defense. And it could end up, I'm saying this on August 2nd. Remember this for January, because there might be some big play we look back on where Mosley made an adjustment that, turned a game for the Jets. Now, head here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll take our focus off key things like CJ Mosley and, games in January. There are a few minor roster moves the Jets made. So a few notable names, a notable name leaving, a notable name the Jets are looking at. We'll talk about who they are as we continue here on this Friday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. You love sports. We love them so much that we never want them to stop. But playoffs have wound down, and now we have fewer games. And the sports are not sportsing like we want them to. But FanDuel lets us keep the sports going whenever we want. All you have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. Of course, we're in baseball season, Yankees and Mets. Jets, if you want to look ahead to the NFL season, you can put some money down on the Jets. Over-unders, if you think the Jets are going to have a big season. Underdogs, week 1 in San Francisco. So if you think the Jets are going to go out to the 49ers and win, FanDuel's the place to go, because this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Friday. Let's talk about some Jets roster moves made recently. So Nick Bawden is gone. The fullback who's been with the Jets the last couple of years was let go. The Jets replaced him with Anthony Firkser, and that might be a familiar name to you. He actually began his career as an undrafted free agent signing with the Jets back in 2017. Did not make the team, but has gone on to have a pretty decent career. Played with Tennessee. That's where he did. That's where he made most of his production with the Tennessee Titans. He played with them between 2018 and 2021. 2022 is with the Falcons. Last year, he spent some time with the Detroit Lions. And the other day I talked on the show. It wasn't the main point. It wasn't the main point I was discussing about how the fullback position is kind of gone out of style in the NFL. And there's still a fullback role. There's still scenarios where teams will put a formation with a fullback on the field, a guy who lines up in front of the running back in a blocking role. But it's very rare that is, or at least it's much rarer than it used to be to have a player on the roster who only plays that role. To the extent the fullback is used now, unless you're a team like Baltimore or San Francisco, generally you have a tight end lined up there when you need a fullback. And I think the idea is the tight ends give you more versatility because you can also move them down the line of scrimmage. You can flex them out wide. Typically, tight ends are going to be better pass catchers than traditional fullbacks. There's some exceptions like the man in San Francisco, but generally speaking, tight ends give you more. Tight ends can do everything a fullback can do, but can also give you more. And if you look through his career, Ferkser has actually been a decently productive player. A couple 30 catch seasons for the Tennessee Titans. Now, the last couple of years, he hasn't done a whole lot in Atlanta. He had 9 catches for 100 yards. Last year, he only played 2 games in Detroit, but this is a time perhaps the Jets are looking for a little bit more out of the fullback spot. This is not a position the Jets are going to use a whole lot. They don't line up with a lot with 2 guys in the backfield. But I think maybe the Jets looking for a little bit more versatility than Bawden brought. Bawden, I thought, was a pretty solid player for the Jets. But if Ferkser can, play it close to the level he played at Tennessee, I think that could be an upgrade for the Jets. It's a very minor upgrade, but an upgrade nonetheless. Jets also brought in a guy who's known for a workout video, Isaiah Winstead. And, if you're familiar with his name, he was an undrafted free agent last year. And, he didn't catch on with a team. And then he posted a workout video to social media and he ended up getting a contract from the San Francisco 49ers as a result. It was kind of an impressive highlight video of what he had done. So look, that's great. I have a lot of respect for that because that's a guy making it happen for himself, guy with great initiative, guy who's 6'4", not overly fast, a bigger type receiver, a guy who I think objectively speaking is probably competing for a practice squad spot. I think it's going to be tough for him to make the Jets roster as a wide receiver. Maybe he can snag one of those last spots if he performs well on special teams. But it's kind of a minor move. The Jets 49ers pipeline continues. I think those teams, Jets look for similar types of players as the 49ers have, because Jets coaching staff came from San Francisco. So I think, there's a bit of a pipeline there. And finally, a player you probably know, the Jets have worked out Jarvis Landry. Landry, former 1,000-yard receiver with the Miami Dolphins out of the slot. In fact, he had three seasons where he went over 1,100 yards, then went to Cleveland, spent a brief stretch with the Saints in 2022. Hasn't played in an NFL game since 2022, and 2020 was the last time he went over 800 yards in the season. So this is a guy who was very well known, big name, guy you probably recognize. How much can he provide at this point? I mean, that's tough to say. The Jets have a lot of guys in their receiver room right now. They've got Garrett, they've got Mike Williams. If you don't like to hear it, they still have Lazard. I know you're not thrilled with that. They have Corley, who they just drafted. Xavier Gibson's probably going to be in the mix. I don't know how much Xavier Gibson's going to give you, but based on some of the returns from the offseason program, it at least sounds like the coaching staff likes Xavier Gibson. So, it's difficult to see where Landry could fit in. What I would almost view Landry as is if somebody gets hurt during the season, maybe that's a guy you bring in as like a short-term replacement or something like that. There was a day where I would have loved to have had Jarvis Landry on the team. There was a point where Landry was a heck of a receiver. I think those days are gone. Landry was drafted in 2014. This is going to be year 11 for him, and his production's really fallen off. He's in his 30s. Not the player he used to be. I'm sure if the Jets signed him, it would generate big headlines. I'm sure it'd be bigger than Tarik Cohen. I remember when the Jets signed Tarik Cohen, people were acting like they got this star running back, this guy who used to be a star. Yeah, Landry was a borderline star at one point, but those days are long gone. If you're going to sign him to be the 6th receiver, well, 6th receivers typically have to play special teams. Again, I think Landry might be, if he wants to go to the practice squad, maybe they sign him to the practice squad. And if there's an injury, you plug in the veteran there who maybe can get you through a couple of games. But I don't see Landry being a bigger player than that. Again, this will probably generate more headlines than it deserves. I don't think Landry is going to, if Landry does sign, I don't see him being a big player for the Jets this season. I see him being more of a kind of a Band-Aid guy if they need somebody at some point, more about being proactive than waiting for an injury and then not knowing what Landry can do. Getting the workout at least shows you where he's at physically right now and gives you an opportunity to assess whether he'd be a good fill-in for you down the line. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you don't miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast for us, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. We'll be back on Monday to talk more Jets.